The previous lesson, we looked at variables and how we can hold content and information and assign it to a variable and then utilize it within our JavaScript. So let's go deeper into this, and there are actually other different ways to hold multiple values with one variable. And these are arrays and objects. And these are also very commonly used within JavaScript. So I'm going to remove out this, and I'm going to show you how you can create an array. So an array is essentially a collection of values that are going to be assigned to one variable name. So if we had something called, we'll just call it A for now, and we're going to equal it to, and this is where we use the square brackets. And then the contents within here is these are the values that are going to be held. So it's going to allow us to hold a whole bunch of different values, and they're going to be indexed within the array. So this is an array, and the same way that we set up variables where we had strings, integers, booleans, we can add these in arrays. So if we had a value of 1, let's do a value of 2, and we can also throw in an integer here, so a numeric value of 3. We can also do a boolean value of false, and then we can also finish that off maybe with a string and so on. So now we've got all of this content available in the variable A, and I'm going to console log this out so you can get a better idea and see exactly what this looks like within the console. So let's update and refresh, and we see that now we've got assigned index values, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and important to remember, important to note here is that we start with the value of 0, and when we hover over it, Chrome actually gives us a sample of bracketed 0 with the index. So now we can actually have a better idea of, well, what if we want to return back and we wanted to utilize one of these values? How would we do that? And they gave us a really good hint there within Chrome, so we know that we've got these bracketed values. These are all indexed starting with 0, so if we want to get this third item, what value could I put in there? I could return a 2, and we see that once we get that corresponding index value, we should return back a value of 3, and in fact we still return back a value of 3 exactly as expected within the array. And the array essentially saves us the trouble of setting up multiple A, B, C, D, E, equaling them to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this allows us to group and create a collection of values that we can utilize really easily within our JavaScript. And we saw how really nice and neatly we can place these values into the array. So there is another way to hold essentially a list of multiple values, and this is using an object. So notice that we're declaring in the same way as any other variables or any other containers where we had A, and this time we're going to create an object. And we're going to create an object with the same type of values. And the difference really is between arrays and objects is that arrays already have it indexed. So we have 1, 2, 3, we're starting out with 0, so they're already indexed. But with objects, they're going to be treated slightly different because we have the opportunity to create how we're going to recall and call back, return back that value. So if we had something like an index of first, and we separate it out by colon, and then we return back 1, and then comma separated it out, and we could do something like second. It's probably not the best idea, so I'm going to do FRT and SAC because we don't want to be using, we want to keep it nice and short there. So notice that we don't need to have quotes around there either. So the second value is 2, and third. And the third value is going to be an integer, so we don't need quotes around it. And now let's take a look at B and how we're returning the B back. And then after, we're going to take a look and we can see how we can get that item within B, how we can return back those values. So let's refresh it and take a look at our object. So we see that the structure is very similar to the array, where we've got the three different multiple items that are accessible via the variable, and we do have that we've got, instead of the index there being assumed that it's numeric 0, 1, 2, 3, we've got these assigned values to it. So now let's say we want to open up the value of 2. How do you think that we would be able to access that and get access to that within the object? So let's open up our editor, and now we got to be more specific with how we're accessing these objects. There's actually going to be two ways that we can access objects. So one, again, it's going to be very similar to the way that we access it within an array, where we do these square brackets and we just need to specify the name that we want to utilize. And there's also another way to do it. So we can indicate the object that we want to use, and we can separate it out by a decimal. So let's take a look at this, open this up, and you can see that we're returning back those same values. So two different ways to return back those same properties. So we can either use that property name, we can return back the value, so we can either use it with a decimal property name, or we could use it within the bracketed. And it is important to understand that there is a difference when you are using these. So sometimes if you're setting it up as dynamically accessible, if you've got some numbers there, then you could use these bracketed formats. So what I mean by that is I'm going to do a quick update here. So sec, and it's, let's say we had a dynamic value here, so we had 0, 1, 2, and so on, and this makes it really easy to loop through these values. And if we are looping through the values, then this is going to dynamically be changing. We're going to be incrementing it. So going back over to here, if we want to call over to SEC, we could really easily do it by doing a +1, and then this can be assumed that this would be a value that would be changing depending on what value we're assigning to it. And then also we would need to update that here. So this would be the equivalent to this, but if we did a +1 here, it wouldn't work really well, because notice that we're not quoting around it, whereas over here we are, so we're able to dynamically change that value. So let's take a look at this, refresh it, and we see that we get those values once again. So important to keep in mind, depending on how you're accessing your object data, then this is how you need to look at outputting that object information. And for the most part, you're not going to see it within this bracketed format. Most of the time people are just using the period and then accessing the main object, and then the property value just specified there, so indicated by the dot. But if you are looking to dynamically loop through a bunch of values within an object, then you could use this type of format as well.